Let's call the meeting to order. It's 4:01.
She likes to drive around.
Yes. We have a quorum, so it's good to go. Want to set the agenda?
Yeah, I'll move to set the agenda.
Jim Hepburn moves to set the agenda. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Unanimous.
Yes.
Unanimous. All right.
All right.
Good. Let's begin.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we move to the first item on the agenda, since we have looks like new faces in this building, if you haven't been here before, there's restrooms between those double doors, and of course exits here. And it looks like everybody's spaced out appropriately, so we're all good. So the first item is an amendment to the contract for our fiscal year 1920 audit, and I'd like for our finance director, Jared Piles, to come up and explain that to you.
Afternoon, Council. Yes, so the first item here is an amendment to the fiscal year 2020 audit contract with us submitting this audit report late. We're going to need approval to amend the contract so that we can approve it and submit it to the LGC on February 28th. As you can see, Adrian kind of passed out a draft copy of the financial statements. This is the draft copy, but from speaking with the auditors and our drafters, none of the numbers are going to be changing. It's just going to be a matter of proofing it this week and then to have it submitted by next Monday, the 28th. So it's imperative that we have that contract amendment approved tonight so that we can get it signed and submit it over to Martin Starnes so that we can submit the audit report.
I appreciate all the work you've done, Jared.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And this is
Very
only
much.
to amend the scope or the duration of the services, correct? There's no additional cost or anything? There was a little bit of an additional cost.
There was. They supplemental billed us last month for time that they had basically sunk into the engagement. Adrian and I both discussed that with them and agreed to terms on that, but there's not going to be any more additional expenditures related to this audit. And it's important for us to go ahead and get this done because once we submit to the LGC, they accept and approve the report, then we can get a new engagement letter to engage for the fiscal year 2021 audit.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anybody else have any questions for Jared?
And this is just for 2020. We're good on 2019.
Oh, yeah, 2019 has already been. That's
Okay, because I know that those two were still, so this is just for, okay,
Yep,
perfect.
just for
Yeah.
2020.
Getting on schedule, right?
That's right.
Getting on
Getting back on
schedule.
schedule, yeah.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate that. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'll make a motion to approve the amendment.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Very good.
Thank you. And so I've handed out the draft financial statements for that fiscal year, so if we look through, we'll get you the final binded copies when we get those. Right.
Yeah, right here.
And then we'll move on, turn the page to 2021. Yes.
Yes.
Thank goodness. The second item is what we had talked about for the workshop.
Yeah.
And I'll open this, and will be just a discussion about housing in general and housing in Belmont in particular, particularly from the vantage point of our local home builders and local sort of small scale developers. Mm-hmm. As staff, we work with everyone, but we would certainly work with our local building community, and I hope that we work well with them. We are not always in a position to give everything and say yes to everything, and sometimes we have to say no to things. And so we try to work through issues that arise. And as all the easy stuff in Belmont has been developed, and so we have these challenging pieces of property all over town that the market now is ready to allow these properties to be developed. And so there's some challenges that we have to work through. We as staff, we hear from the development community about all sorts of issues, and our job as staff is to implement the rules and follow the ordinances and processes. And so since we don't make the rules, we just enforce them, and sometimes suggest changes to the rules where we think it's appropriate. We wanted to have an opportunity for our local building community to talk to you, again, about the housing market in Belmont, about some infill development, small scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses, not the 200, 300 unit projects that are happening on greenfield development. But we want an opportunity to have the building community come and just have a discussion with you from their perspective. I've been talking with Cynthia Hagler, who was recently appointed to the planning board, but has been involved in building in Belmont for a while. And she wanted to have a platform for the building community to come and just talk to you. So this will just be an open discussion, and I'll turn it over to Cynthia for that, but just sort of some ground rules, because based on my experience with several folks in the room, we're very passionate about our positions. And so, which is a really nice way of saying sometimes we say bad words to each other, but we're okay. So this is just a good opportunity for everybody to talk, and hopefully you'll hear from their perspective. Hopefully you'll hear from their perspective. If there's anything that we need to change, we can have some direction from the council to the staff to look into some of the issues that are brought up. But with that, I'll stop talking and turn it over to Cynthia.
Okay. I wasn't really prepared for public speaking today, but I'll just go for it.
Well, you can delegate that out.
Great. Thanks for letting us come in here and talk to you guys today. We just wanted an opportunity as a group to kind of explain some of the hardships we've been going through and some ideas to maybe refocus the conversation and help everybody out. So we put together this slide about the national housing crisis and the growth in Belmont, because it's something that affects the whole entire nation right now, and really big in Charlotte. We're in, is it the top 10 biggest cities, or is it top 5 that are growing? I think we're in the top 5. So of course that has to do with us too. Shelly, this button isn't working.
Is it on?
Is it that?
Yes, it is. There's 2. It was working.
Yeah. Okay.
Where's that go?
Well, the first slide. Well, here we go. Thank you. The first slide that we wanted to kind of start this discussion on is average home prices and average base salaries in Belmont. So statistically, I pulled up some average salaries. Well, the whole average salary in Belmont is about $51,648 per year. And then we have some other, the average city of Belmont employee is $43,651. Average Belmont police officers, $43,203. And then I pulled the Belmont Abbey faculty and staff at $55,000. And then basically I ran those against mortgage numbers, what an average person making an average salary in Belmont could afford. And that came up to $187,000. That's figuring that they have no other debt, no car payments or anything like that. So as of February 15th, when I started working on that in the MLS, there is no home within a 5-mile radius of Belmont for $187,000. And the closest, most affordable 3-bedroom, 2-bath in that 5-mile radius was a single house for $245,000. So I just really wanted to display the issue between what our average citizens make and can afford and what we have available to offer them. So this is about middle housing. It's something that our zoning's missing out on right now. And this is a description of what middle housing is. So it refers to homes that are on the building spectrum or in the middle. So they're not single family homes or high density apartment buildings. They're, let's see, in the past it is sometimes referred to as infill housing. So that's buildings such as duplexes and townhouses that contribute to the diversity of housing options in a city. And it also contributes to different levels of affordability. Developing missing middle housing increases the housing stock while catering to a variety of demographics, including millennials and multi-generational households that are looking for smaller homes in walkable neighborhoods. So the first highlight that I wanted to open the discussion with everybody about is identifying where we as a community would like to see medium to high density development. First off, by defining what high density, I was looking at other municipalities. They had examples of 12 to 25 dwelling units per gross acre. And I feel like I'm talking a lot, so anybody can jump in. But I think as a community right now, we have a real lack of different zoning options, like duets, which we've been talking about a lot, are a very popular housing option in Charlotte. It's something our zoning doesn't even recognize, so we can't build them, and we can't even put in special use permits to build them.
You guys know what Duet Homes are?
Well, maybe, I know you all had a discussion, but I left before you had that discussion. So is that, correct me if I'm wrong, is that like a house, there's like, because my grandmother and her sister used to live, it is like a house, but it's like one house, but there's really two houses in it? Or?
Yeah, it's basically a duplex with a party wall, but the forms of ownership are different. So in a traditional duplex, you have one owner. In a duet home, you have multiple owners in each respective side. So, and then the whole parcel is governed by an HOA that you set up for that.
Like a two-member HOA, perhaps?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you actually don't have to have an HOA by law to do that. You can design a dividing wall in such a way that this person maintains this half, this person maintains this half. So if you need to repaint your half or re-roof your half, then you've got that responsibility. Very common in Charlotte. Under the Gaston County, in the city of Gastonia zoning code, it is allowed, but it's not allowed in Belmont. And typically, the wording on that is you've got to have the two doors on opposite streets. So typically, it would be reserved for a corner lot, but in Charlotte, in their more dense areas, R6, I think, and above, you actually have the two front doors or three front doors, up to four on one lot, and they can all face forward. It's a great way to provide more affordable housing, because you've already got the one large lot, which I know a lot of you are familiar with the Belmont lots. They range anywhere from 25 to 150 feet in a lot of these older districts.
One real drawback with our zoning is that there's no places that we've identified that are walkable to town and amenities that we'd be more agreeable to making higher density. So I know we have a lot of people that are against higher density, but even areas that are walkable to Main Street or walkable to downtown or would support medium density, we're not even able to do that. And as we grow, I think we should identify areas where people can walk to work, walk to restaurants, walk to amenities, to be a medium density areas where it's easier for us to build different kinds of housing that are more affordable and are more diverse for how different ways people want to live. Because not everybody wants to live in a single family residential house. So that is our first.
Were you referencing the council is against high density or the population?
I think I've heard that a lot. I wouldn't even say the majority of people. It's just a complaint I've heard. I've heard from people that, because of our traffic problems or whatever, they don't want more people moving here. But of course, more people are going to move here, and we're not going to be able to stop that. So this is a way to kind of get some people in without of our housing prices going to $500,000 by next year for an average house. So here is a list of different kind of housing types that we currently do not recognize. And I'll go through each one of them as well. That would really help us, especially in walking areas, add to our inventory of housing. So the first one is urban apartments, townhomes, Duet Homes, which Duet Homes are very similar to townhomes. They're just one to 4 units on one lot. Cottage Green Developments, which we currently don't recognize. And then also at the end of this, there's been some talk about estate-sized lots. So we want to have a conversation about the implications on that to people who are moving in those areas and what that would mean for them. So,
Tell me what a cottage green development is.
what was that?
What's a cottage green development?
That's what I was going to ask.
If you give me 2 seconds, I have a whole bunch of sentences on here.
Okay.
I think she's even got a picture.
Yes.
Oh, the pictures are good.
Yes. So I started here, urban apartments, and we do have some of those. I did go ahead and list Aberfall Village and the Chronicle Mill there. The next one is Duet Homes. So we've had some discussion on those. These, I think, are some of the biggest ones because they are so popular in other areas and people are looking for them here already. And there's no opportunity for us to build them or add them right now. So similar to duplexes, you can have one owner on each side instead of one owner for the whole entire building. So right now we can build duplexes, but a single owner has to own both sides.
Only if it's over 10,000 square foot lot size.
Right, only if the lot's over 10,000 square foot. Which in Charlotte, they have a rule there that you can do it on corner residential lots, which makes things very easy. What it does is it stops a whole bunch of special use permits. They've identified the corner lots, they have doors on both sides, or there's corner residential streets, you can do it there. And that makes it easier, especially for developers, to identify places that they can work if somebody's looking for one.
Do they limit the square footage of the lot for the corner lots?
They do not. The building, of course, is limited by the offsets. You can make them as
Setbacks.
big as you could put one single residential house. You can just do 2 people living in it instead of 1.
I can only speak for myself, but it would not tear me apart if there were fewer special use permits that came before us.
You don't want John to feel hungry.
We would also be a fan of having to do fewer special use permits. They're pretty nerve-wracking.
Yes.
They're not fun for us. So I think that should even be really one of our goals, is to make places where we're comfortable with these things and rules that we can do them so that there would be less special use permits, because that whole thing is just not fun. So anyway, so also Duet Homes, one nice thing about them is they look very similar to single family residential. So oftentimes when you drive by them, you can't even really tell that they're 2 units. They look like a large house that 2 families live in. So, and then the Cottage Green Developments, which I had to research a little bit on this too, but it's cottage housing or cottage clusters. They're groups of smaller detached housing units. They're typically between 800 to 1,200 square feet, which are oriented around a common open space like a courtyard, garden, or walkway. Parking areas for these developments are located on the side or rear of the cottage to emphasize the community space. And this is a very community-oriented, close-knit, and smaller-scale housing. It's frequently used as infill options for single-family neighborhoods, since it can match the existing aesthetics while adding more housing units. So I know that there's some vacant land around that until now has been unfeasible to use, but some of these would go great if we could recognize them and work together to start utilizing the different types of building. So from there, does anybody else want to say anything about the different kind of zoning?
No, I can talk a little bit about the estate lot size.
Okay.
So, when Belmont was first developed by the mills and things, the lot sizes were 25 feet at the smallest so that the average person could purchase a lot. And so we still find that there are lots that are 25 feet wide with a 400 square foot dwelling on it. But if you tear that down, per the zoning code, you couldn't even build a house there. You could build basically a wall, maybe a bathroom. And then you've got lots where some of the managers back then would buy 4 or 5 lots combined, 100 feet, 150 feet. But our form-based zoning code doesn't allow you to just take that 150-foot lot and make it 50-foot lots, which is pretty reasonable and extremely common in Charlotte, Gastonia. Technically it has to be 55 feet or within the average. But your average, goes from 25 to 250 because then some lots have a creek running diagonally through it, but only 50 feet of that property is buildable. The other 240 feet is essentially useless, but you have to take that number into consideration, which raises that average. And so specifically in the Reed community, we tried to do one on Woodrow. It was 100 feet wide. The zoning code says the minimum lot for a new development is 55 feet. And if it's infill, then you have to use that number of averages. So you take a 300-foot radius around your one property, calculate that, and in this case, one of the lots was 270, 300 feet wide, something like that, but it had that creek storm drain. So most of that was essentially useless, but that really skewed the average. And the house that we were trying to tear down was described by one council member as perfectly fine. He had obviously never been in there. It cost us $70,000 to remodel it. So now we're selling an old ugly house that was encroached in 3 of the 4 setbacks, side, rear, and front. We were going to try and put in 2 1,500 square foot houses, no garages. They were going to be more affordable, and they would have abided by the city's setbacks, except for the lots would have been 50 feet instead of 55, or the law of averages required, I think, 62, 65 feet, something like that. And so, we spent $5,000 trying to do a conditional use permit and got turned down by council. The Reed community came out with pitchforks, accused me personally of tearing down their school in the 60s. You can tell I'm not even capable of that. So that's one issue with the estate size lots, is we need a better way to break those down to provide more housing.
Yeah, I think the lot sizes as a whole, that's very similar issue we had over on Farrell, my special use permit, where each lot only needed 2 extra feet. We ended up having to do a special use permit that started as one thing and snowballed into just really out of hand. And it ended up now just 2 very large houses, each on an acre lot, when it really could have been 3 houses on 3rd acres that would have been more affordable. So the lot sizes and doing the radiuses, what we have now compared to what we need to be, makes it a real hardship to develop infill, single 1, 2, or 3 small subdivisions.
That lot actually would have been perfect for the, go back one screen, this little green development thing, because it was over 2 acres of land, but it was 350 feet deep, went all the way to the railway, but it was elevated, so even if you built a house, in the back 40 or 50 feet, it'd be pretty quiet because the train's down below. It's far enough from any crossway that they wouldn't blow their horn. Well, they shouldn't anyways.
Honking horns is very bad, I've learned over the last year.
I think they've got to do it within a quarter mile of every crossing. But this idea right here, it'd been very easy to utilize something like this. Install basically parking on the 2 sides instead of having to do a full road with a cul-de-sac, all the infrastructure, things like that. You'd have all the water meters and sewer taps up at the front on Farrell Avenue, and you could design it literally like this picture. We could have provided, 8 to 12 houses on this one lot. Instead, now she's stuck with 2 houses on 2 huge lots, making them, more expensive, and it really eliminated a great opportunity.
Shelley, riddle me this. I hear what they're saying. Like, what are some options of what we could do with the land development code in this regard? Because, how maybe can we make it more flexible or not invoke the special use permit quite so often to do some of these things that maybe, because it seems like this might be one of our better ways to achieve affordable housing, is to do sort of these infill developments, because I don't know how, other than Dixon Village, how enthusiastic the larger developers are about such things. So, I mean, I understand what they're all saying is what could be done potentially with the land development code to maybe address some of these concerns.
Well, you have a wonderful planning board that we could utilize to take a good look at the missing middle. That is something missing from our code. It does require open-mindedness for infill development in product type. But again, with our form-based code, you can also ensure that you put in enough safety, such as architecture on these special types of units to ensure that it blends with the community. But it's not just on building form that I see causes a problem for our infill developers. It's also some aspects of our code. Our code was written for greenfield type of development. Nothing's out there, it's all raw land. But in infill situations, our code is a lot more difficult to apply, whether it's sidewalks or they're trying to do an infill project on what we call a paper road that may only be 30 feet wide, and our minimum road width now is 40. Everything impacts an infill development. Our tree ordinance, for example, although meaning well, we've also applied it to our minor subdivisions. That means, a 2-3 lot subdivision could be restricted to save trees on the site, which it sounds good. But once developed, they don't have any open space requirements. So that means these preserved trees are all on the individual single-family lots, which will then get an easement on it to be protected. Yet our ordinance says if you have existing lots with trees on it, you can take them down if you want to. It doesn't impact an existing lot. But if you want to do a new development, we're saying that you have to go ahead and put a constraint on these properties. So there are other aspects of our code that is problematic. Even some of our, I'm going to say storm drainage. The easy land is already developed. So when someone does infill, a lot of times they're taking on problematic properties that may already get all the drainage from a neighborhood. So what wasn't built to current standards upstream is going to all land on their property downstream, and then they're trying to plan for it. So they're taking on burdens of an entire infrastructure. So there are various aspects that are problematic when you're applying, again, a greenfield type of development off raw land versus an infill situation.
And I would mention that back in the early 90s, our code and our zoning actually included something similar to cottage green. It was not called at the time. And so we had one of the first traditional neighborhood development pieces that all went together in the nation. So what we had, though, unfortunately, we had some developers who came in after that zoning board was dissolved by one of our former mayors. And so you have some of these issues that you're discussing were created then by developers. And so we're still, with Shelley's help and our people, trying to figure out that. Because when I go home, since my husband was involved with that, I'll say, why does this happen? He said, that's because of what happened with the developers. So we had a much better situation then than what we're seeing now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask this, where would you find infill development to occur? I mean, we've seen, my experience has been, a lot of them seem to be along Julia Avenue where there are, or that area where there might be some empty lots.
Yeah.
Or it could be a lot of different places. Maybe you buy an old house or a burned out house and on a larger lot and tear down that structure and want to build 2 or 3 instead of 1. So could it really, are we looking at vacant lots, or could it be really anywhere if you obtain the house and that property and then want to maybe put 2 houses instead of 1?
Well, I think there's, right now, most of my projects are actually in the Reed neighborhood. And and we'll get to that down here, but a lot of the issues in the Reed neighborhood is infrastructure. So there are a lot of vacant lots down there that are unusable because the city has their sewer and water lines running through people's private property.
With no easement.
Right,
With
well,
no
yeah, we ran
easements.
into that on
Right,
Lee
no
Street.
recorded easements, and
Yeah.
nobody wants to sit down and work it out. And you're
Yeah.
talking about over 10 houses. That's a
Yeah.
lot of people. Of course, burn down houses like I did on Farrell.
Yeah,
I'm trying to, eventually, people are going to start tearing down houses. I think that's already happening. I know we're getting ready to take one down. I think you've taken one down.
I've taken down 2 or 3.
So
Mhm.
Elm Street over in the Reed neighborhood, it might be Elm Street Extension. I bought 2 parcels. There's 600 feet of technical road frontage, but there was only about 100 feet of actual street. And when I talked with zoning about the potential of dividing this into 5 or 6 lots, they said yes, but I'd have to spend somewhere around $500,000 to extend the street on my dollar, 6-inch water main on my dollar. But now this tree ordinance would have completely eliminated that because of all the different requirements in the tree save and open area, things like that. Not to mention the $500,000 infrastructure that would have been put on my plate, because at one point somebody said, all right, well, let's just stop Elm Street Extension right here, even though the easement goes all the way to the end. And then I was willing to give up the land to make a cul-de-sac. Or there's an easement down there that could have been turned into another road. A lot of opportunities down there to make some of the unbuildable lots currently buildable. And these 2 lots both had a house on them. One house had trees growing through it. It was 600 square feet. The roof was on the floor. It was, you didn't even see it through the trees. Is how old and abandoned it had been. The other one, to my knowledge, somebody had lived there up until 5 years prior to me purchasing it. And when you look at it, nobody should have been living in that house. I tore down another house where their sewer line just drained into the crawl space. So you got a lot of houses in Belmont that were built and developed poorly 100+ years ago that really should not be standing or maintained. They need to be torn down and replaced. But with these lots, we really need to figure out a way to have a small subdivision like that. Because I'm not Lennar coming in with 50 acres. I had 1 acre, and it was the perfect scenario to have 6 50-foot lots. But taking on $500,000 in infrastructure, now it's no longer viable. So why would I lose money to provide affordable housing? No offense, but I'm not in the business of losing money. So.
Did you have something you wanted to add, John?
Well, there's another kind of dirty word in the downtown redevelopment or infill, and that's deed restrictions. And I know it's not the responsibility of the city to opine or even manage those kinds of restrictions, but there's 5 plats in Belmont, Cottonwood 1, 2, and 3, and Chronicle 1 and 2, and there's probably 140 lots in those, and they're restricted 40 years. That'll end up sometime in 2030. In the process of developing Chronicle Mill, I sold 10 lots. The largest was 6.5 acres. The other 9 were mill homes, all deed restricted. And I worked with Jennifer for 2 years and spent a considerable amount of money trying to get those waived for those lots that we had. And I think we needed 75%. We got to 65%. And then we went ahead with the development. But the reality is that even though the city does, and I agree with the city's position about they can't opine upon them and they don't have any, just like HOA restrictions, they have to be enforced by the courts. But that hasn't happened, and those deed restrictions are going to run for another 9 years before those are released. So point being is that even though the city is not responsible for it, when somebody tries to do something on these lots, they may be violating the deed restrictions, maybe and not knowing it, and they can close on it potentially. And there's probably houses out there that encroach on the deed restrictions.
Well, wouldn't that have to be, couldn't that be located through a title search? Or?
Yeah, absolutely, it could. But on the other hand, though, the reality of that is that if you want to redevelop these lots so that they can be the highest and best used and provide I'd like to try to work with the city to say, how do we deal with these deed restrictions? Can the city support trying to either change them or saying, for example, why did we have them to begin with? Well, my interpretation would be that they were put on there to protect the owners, okay? Well, that's what zoning does typically. So do you really need them? Not, probably not. But the point is that there's 140 lots in this community that are deed restricted that I know of. There may be more. But those, I think if an owner wanted to try to, because I have a corner lot at 200 Catawba Street. And to your point, I'd like to put a duet there or two homes there. But it's 9,200 square feet. So by definition, I couldn't do that potentially because of the deed restrictions or the lot limitation size. But in Charlotte, there's not.
Right, there's not a limitation on the size.
But it'd be better utilized because it is 2 lots. So all I'm saying is that we're trying to sit down here and talk about trying to reuse land to its highest and best use. These deed restrictions are encumbering quite a few lots, and if there was a way for us to work with the community to try to eliminate those, so the city would be able to better utilize them in the future, because a lot of them are vacant.
Yeah.
So you won't be able to do much with them. They'll be vacant.
John, you got the property on Back Street too?
Yeah, I've got one on
Short Street on 6 Short.
6 Short, and I've got 2 on 6 Short.
Okay.
2 lots back there, and then I have 2 lots on First Street, and then 5 lots on the corner of First and Catawba Street. And we were getting ready to develop those into 3 duplexes, and have stopped that right now to try to get some further clarification on that.
Yeah.
But they're all affected, so it's impacting again the redevelopment of housing in the community. So again, I know it's not the city's problem, but it is when I've worked with the city for months on a development, and then all of a sudden we go, oh, you can't do it. The deed restrictions, the things that we were planning to do, the city was okay with, but may not be okay with the deed restrictions. So again, somehow to work with the city to either identify them, try to change them, or to work something out so that we could, what is it? Can they be eliminated?
I don't know how, I mean, that's an area I understand it's and I understand it might be ultimately a problem for the city, but I don't I don't know if there's anything that the city can do about that. Whether it should wade into private deed restrictions or not. I mean, that might just be it's the same thing when we had the situation on Lee Street, and yes, it's a problem that caused a lot of flooding, but could we go in there and do anything about it?
The answer to that question is yes. We will all give you easements, and we want you to come in and do something about it.
Well, it's easy to say everyone will give an easement, but
they will. I've talked to all of them. We already have them written up. Whenever you're ready for them, we'll bring them over.
Well,
but that's a perfect.
But I mean that's a question.
That's a perfect example, though, of doing nothing doesn't work either. So what I'm trying to say is that if you realize you have a problem, and to redevelop land in highly desirable areas, and everybody's trying to work out to get the best end results, that these deed restrictions don't work in anybody's behalf because they're over 30 years old and they don't apply. The appellate court ruled on deed restrictions over 30 years and said that they don't apply, but that'll probably go to the Supreme Court here in North Carolina before it's finally, reported. But anyway, it seems like, you're bumping up against this all the time. How can we work together to say, at least try to maybe communicate to some of the landowners that have it what they're up against. I don't know. It's frustrating.
So one of the things, jump in, for those of you who don't know me, I'm John Russell. I'm a lawyer in Gastonia. I've been in front of council on a number of occasions, and had the privilege of working with a lot of the folks here. I think the common thread that I think I've seen through a number of projects is, and to follow up on what Shelley said, is the code does not provide the staff with a lot of flexibility. And from Mr. Heffron's point, you've got infill all throughout the town. I mean, you may see, there's certainly been a lot of special use permits on Julia, but they've been in other places too, and there have been special use permits for duplexes to allow them to exist on less than 10,000 square feet. But in some places, the issue might be infrastructure. In some places, the issue might be the impact of the tree save ordinance. In some places, the issue might be transportation and how much traffic there might be in a certain location. And the code right now doesn't have, and in some places it might be housing type, you know, what sort of housing. The one thing that you didn't address was the townhomes. And the way our code is written, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Shelley, is that townhomes can be built in single family and general residential only if you have a large scale development and only if it's 30% of that development.
Yeah.
So you're excluding your local home builders from any opportunity to build townhomes because these folks are not building large developments where they can set aside 30% for townhomes. And, you know, townhomes may not be appropriate in every infill setting, but in some places they might be. And I think if you had some flexibility to allow staff to work with them, this is a group of people that are local, that are invested in the community. You know, I'm sort of going off on a tangent here, but one of the things that council can do to sort of support the community in general is support your local home builders. I mean, those are the folks that are, if something breaks on their equipment, they're going to Belmont or Gastonia to get it repaired. If somebody needs a job, they're hiring locally. So the support and the better they do, the better the community does. But in any event, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that there's always going to be some tension between the right to use property freely as the property owner wants it on the one hand, the builder side, and on the city side, the idea to regulate property for the common good of all the people. And so there's always going to be tension, as Adrian said, and we're probably never going to resolve that entirely, but having some flexibility for some of these more difficult projects, the ones that may need some infrastructure coming in or may need some help with a turn lane or something to address traffic that's not directly due to that development, but is already there. Or the idea to allow a different housing type, which might not exist, or some flexibility with the tree ordinance or things that are very well intended and that may be needed but might not work in a particular place, I think is sort of the common thread and part of why we're here and what we're advocating for and what we're hoping to come out of some of the dialogue.
I don't know, did y'all have anything more about infrastructure? Because I know that is interesting to me because like when we approve a new development, you know, like whether it's Del Webb or whatever, that's usually open space and they're just going to extend water and sewer out to it from some connection so it's brand new. But you all, if you're in, you know, it seems like older parts of town might be more where you find infill development and there might be more infrastructure issues there. So I'd be interested.
I do have a discussion on infrastructure because that is a big one. Right before that, I'm just leading off what John said, you know, supporting us is supporting local small business builders and developers. Local developers are more creative. We care more about our community. We don't leave our market just like larger developers. They kind of make their stuff, leave, they get out. We understand the hardship of that and that a lot of the rules were created to stop that. But the rules on that situation is affecting your local developers. So the slide right before infrastructure, because infrastructure, I was going to end with that one because that's a big one. But before that is just minimizing red tape and streamlining our processes. It would be wonderful if we could stop coming in with so many special use permits. I do have the tree ordinance on here on small subdivisions. because right now that tree ordinance is putting easements on private property. Do you want to talk about that some?
Yeah, for sure. And pretty much, I agree with everything that Cynthia's said about needing diversity of housing. I for one want to quit building $800,000 spec homes. Personally, I would like to have more options. I agree with everything she's got to say. I will say quickly, just in the short term, if you take the current law of averages you have to limit your special proceedings or your special use request, pick an arbitrary percentage that you can exceed that average, and that eliminates a vast majority. So when Troy is 3 foot off, or if I've come before you on multiple occasions where, if you take the averages of what exists versus the averages of what it will be when I'm gone, and I'm within point like 0.2%, which I've had those cases, that eliminates that altogether. And because quite literally anyone riding down the road doesn't know the difference between 80 and 90 feet, or 80 and 95 feet, or 50 and 60 feet. It's a line on a piece of paper that people get so worked up about. So that would be one way I would say in the short term to fix that problem is make a text amendment.
And it certainly wouldn't be arbitrary. I can tell you that, because we don't act arbitrarily or capriciously, but we would have a number. And I understand what you're saying.
Well, I don't have the number sitting here.
We would find a number, and but it just wouldn't be arbitrary.
I didn't say pull from air.
Okay.
That wasn't my intent.
Okay.
So, and as far as the trees go, I think, and I speak for myself here, but I also speak, I think, in this respect to everyone who owns property here. And in your tree ordinance, it takes away 20% of the usable space. And that's not on a site plan. That's a recorded easement. And Shelley and I had that discussion. That is 20% of a quarter acre lot. That's someone's building. That's someone's deck. That's a pool. That's my property that you're taking 20% away from. If you impose the same tree save on a large developer that has 20 acres, they're going to take 20% and give you the trash. You're going to get a stream, or you're going to get some hills, or you're going to get some mud that they can't develop on. And then they are free to do what they want to with the other 16 acres. If you take 20% of any of my property, that's a material fact that I now have to disclose to anyone who buys that property. You have since reduced the value of my property and my product by 20%. Also, you've reduced the creativity of what I'm able to build there, and the different housing types that I'm able to offer, and the different options. So it is a gross overreach that I really got burned up about when I first read it, because it shouldn't apply to infill development. And I have no problem giving the city easements, because I give you a 5-foot easement around my property all the time. I've given Jerry a 10-foot easement on one of my properties on the side back for a storm sewer on Catawba Street. It didn't affect me any, so I don't mind having the easement there to help everybody. So I'm not against the easements. I'm not against zoning. I am against you taking my property and limiting my options on what I can do with it. I think that's just a gross overreach.
How many homes have you built in Belmont?
I don't know. I don't count.
Don't know.
No, sir.
I remember having
Probably 30 plus.
I remember having this conversation when we discussed the tree ordinance, and I thought we had exempted infill or some sort of infill districts.
Well, I'll say to your point, I have it in front of me.
I don't remember exactly what it was.
Residential infill is any single lot or combination of adjacent lots in a built-up residential area or neighborhood which is currently vacant or will become vacant by demolition or structure. So essentially, if you look at exemptions and reliefs, development plans as the term is defined, utilized, and applied within this chapter and exclusive to this chapter exempt the following types. And in that is residential infill development. So when I come before the board, or not the board, but when I came before Shelley on a one I have now, and when Will Hammett came before Shelley, we are told, and I love Shelley, she's very helpful, but we were told you have to put 20% tree save and it has to be platted on your plat. But I have it infill development. So then I called John Russell, and Will calls John Russell, and people try to figure out, okay, well, if it says I'm exempt, then why am I doing it? And to your point, So, and I think, you know, and I'll say something else off tangent, but essentially you have the same people in town commenting and interacting with a council member online, and it's the same 30 people all the time. The 30 people are not the voice of town. They're not your intellectual populace. Your intellectual populace is remaining silent until there's a problem. And we all got together because we feel there's a problem. So that's why we're all here. And this is, I mean, I don't know, can you speak to that, Shelley, please?
Yes, I can. So originally, when the tree ordinance came before the council, it recommended required tree save even on existing infill lots. So that means if you had a vacant lot and you wanted to develop it, you had to do a tree save. Some of the council members did not like, they wanted it to apply to development if somebody was subdividing and not existing property owners if you have an existing one lot. So that exemption was put in there. We also were able to get an exemption for subdivision, minor subdivisions that are exempt from state law. They do not have to have, but regular minor subdivisions do. So if you're exempt from the subdivision law per the state, or you have an existing single lot or multiple that you're going to build on, but they're existing, not a subdivision, you are not prone to the subdivision regulations. But it is confusing based on how our infill definition is written. And so it has come up, but since I was involved the very beginning with the committee, the planning board, and the council, I knew the intent of how that ordinance ended up.
Okay, so if you were to take a lot and chop it up.
Right,
would
then
be
you're subject to, unless you're exempt from the minor subdivision. The state has a few minor subdivisions where if you have under 2 acres, you're doing 3 lots, you're exempt. You do not have to. But I can tell you, since we have adopted this last amendment that applies to minor subdivisions, it is very problematic to apply.
And I know we've also tweaked the ordinance on occasion. We've already tweaked it at least once, haven't we, based on
That was for a commercial project.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's not that we can't go in and say, all right, this is all great, but here's what, in practice, this has been, because, yeah, it was with commercial, but we saw that in practice it caused a problem.
That's correct.
So that's not, doesn't mean we can't do it again because we want to get it,
That's correct.
we want it to be optimal. and not-
Ordinances are intended to be fluid. And
Yes.
so they evolve over time. Sometimes they're modified because they turn out to be problematic to implement.
Yes.
This is the most problematic thing for me personally. I think everything else pretty well flows okay around here. I've been here since 2008. It's now 2022. So I've seen a lot of stuff change. I've ridden with a lot of changes, and this here is a problem. And I have never once ever lobbied any council person ever for anything. I've never had a serious discussion with any council person. And in all my years of being here, I think me and Kevin and me and Adrian got in a scuffle over some silt fence because water doesn't flow uphill, and that's it. That's the extent of any problems that you guys have ever had with me. So I'm pretty upset about this, and I think it's wrong, and I think it needs to be changed. And it's not because I want to build a bunch more houses. It's because I worked my butt off to buy property and place my money and to develop really nice things here. And I want to be able to freely do that. And 20% of a quarter acre is unacceptable. And I'm all for put a tree here, put a tree there, 2 trees. That's fine. Don't mandate me to have a tree of a certain size on a certain lot and then tell me I have to grade around it. It just doesn't work for infill. And then if you want to get the infrastructure, is that where we're going?
That's the last one.
I did have
we can
one-
have open comment.
I did have one question about density as it relates to affordability. So if the goal of increasing density in infill is to make homes more affordable, how do you ensure that actually happens so that, like, you know, if the market price for a 3.2 is 300?
Oh, well, I have an answer to
Oh,
that.
well, yeah, she has an answer.
Well, because I think.
Well, no, I mean, I'll tell you my perspective.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the simple law of economics, supply and demand.
Well, that
Your
is true.
problem right now is you have low supply and high demand. As soon as you ease it up a little bit and you increase the supply, you're going to lower the demand. I mean, that's just how the market works.
It's not,
I
it's
can
not the
understand.
city's responsibility though, to dictate, pricing. It's we're set up, our whole country is off of a free market principles.
Right.
So
No,
if
I
it works, it works.
I agree
I
with
can
that.
understand.
Yeah, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's not your responsibility. But your
No.
legislation specifically can lead to the increased prices of homes, and I don't think that's anybody's goal here.
No, but I mean, we're a very small fish in a very big pond.
But we're
so.
a fish.
And we're an important fish.
Yeah,
And it's
we're
our
affected.
fish.
Yeah,
So,
the school's affected.
I mean, I don't know.
I do.
It's just, I mean, there's a trade-off here between the density and then the stresses it puts on other city services.
Your goal should be to increase and bring as many people here as possible to enjoy the parks that you guys have funded and built, and to enjoy the taxpayer money that we all spend to keep this place going. It creates an economically viable system
community.
in community. It's not to, hey, I'm here now, because I talk to people too. I'm here now. Let's keep everybody else out. That's the mindset of a lot of the people that I talk to. I think that's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly not my mindset. I think that it's the, you know, maintaining some amount of control of it so you don't get too far ahead of yourselves.
We're all local people. We all live in this community. I'm from here. We are invested here. If you kick us out, we're gone. And then the people who don't care come in. Every one of these people buy property because they have personal relationships, or I knew your daddy, or I knew your granddaddy, or whatever. And it's kind of, we keep a lid on the place pretty tight. It's not like Charlotte where there's so much transiency that every now and then, you know, houses keep continuing to pop up for sale. People come here and they stay. So it's very hard to do our business in this town.
One of the hopes, I think, when you're building, it's going to be really hard to control the cost of new homes, just the property and the cost of materials, construction, and labor. But one of the hopes in expanding your inventory for new homes that are available is decreasing the pressure on existing homes, the homes that were built in the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, so that the prices are not really escalating astronomically on those, and so that those can stay affordable. People that are living in there, maybe on a fixed income, can stay in those homes a little longer. So there is kind of a backside effect. It's going to be probably really hard from a council or governmental standpoint to say, we're going to do these X things and then we'll see an immediate response on what the home prices are going to be.
Yeah.
But I feel like your question's really good, and I'm not sure there's a perfect answer, but one of the hopes for expanding your supply is that you decrease some of the pressure on people that are living there and some of the increases in on what's already current inventory, just because the land value is going up so quickly.
So, John, what you're saying is if we ease up on the restrictions of the number of houses we can build, we'll get more tax revenue from that eventually because more people will buy houses. Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm not trying to make a direct correlation to tax revenue. I'm talking mostly about the price of new homes.
Yeah.
And so your new homes are, because of the quality of work that they're doing, are always going to be the top of your cost structure.
Well, if more people buy homes, we're going to have tax revenue anyway.
Yep, there's going to be that.
Yeah.
Certainly you're going to have that.
Yeah.
But in theory, if you have more new homes and more housing stock available, the existing homes are not going to have the same inflationary price increase, or the rate of increase is not going to go up quite as fast. And so there is that benefit if you're looking for what can we do and how do these changes or flexibility or whatever tweaks to the ordinance, how does that work or how is that helpful? That's one way, is to try to look at what's the acceleration rate of our current inventory and how fast is that going up, and are these policies and efforts having a help there? And I think there is some evidence that that does help on the
Okay.
existing homes.
Because my question is, I mean, y'all say, well, this will allow for more affordable housing, but just in my own experience, other than
I know, I was
Cynthia's,
about to say the feral. I have a good feral
yeah,
example.
but I don't know if I'd consider what you all have brought to us through special use permit affordable housing.
The
Now, I
one that
don't
came
know
to us
whether
the other
that-
night, he said it was like $600,000 or something for those
Yeah.
houses. Which,
Well-
I mean, I don't care what you sell them for, but like if the goal of the policy is to make housing more affordable,
I think in general, that's not a goal, and I don't think anybody's sitting here trying to sell you affordability. I think as a general anecdotal statement, that if you have more houses, then you're gonna have varying types
Sure.
and lesser degrees of purchase
More
prices.
people spending.
I think that's all we're saying.
Well,
I'm not here like with a championing a flag for cheap houses. That's not my deal.
one thing is, just so this is a real example, the Farrell project was going to be 3 houses for $325,000. And now there are 2 houses for $750,000. So that's a real life example. You could have had $325,000 is affordable right now for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So you could have had 3 houses for $325,000, and now you have 2 for $750,000. They're never going to hit the market because I'm going to keep them. So that's
Yeah.
a real life example of the effects of red tape on developers.
Also, to speak to Councilman Seelinger's point about increasing density, we're not trying to make every infill parcel R22. You know, you look at Charlotte's GIS system, it's called Polaris, and you can pull up their zoning, and you'll find a dozen 1/4 to half-acre parcels mistakenly zoned R22. And when a developer gets his hands on that, he packs in 22 per acre. That's not what we're looking to do. We're hoping to get 2 on, a corner lot. We're hoping to get 2 on a 100-foot wide lot without having to spend $5,000 on hiring Mullen, Holland, and Cooper, going before the planning board, going before city council, being held up on a pitchfork from the community, and then worrying that council is going to rule in favor of that community because it's election season. That was my exact feeling when I went through this, because I was off by 5 feet per parcel. Like Andrew said, if I'm off by a margin of less than 1%, when I finish these 2 new lots that are 5 feet short, one, nobody here is going to drive by and notice. I won't notice, and I do this every day. But at the end of the day, and the new percentage changed by 1/4%, then it should have went through with flying colors. That should have never went to city council. We should not have had a whole city council meeting at 11 p.m. to discuss that.
Yeah.
We don't want to build McMansions. We also don't want to build Chronicle Mill everywhere. We're looking for some flexibility to provide more products out there, which will, like Cynthia said, drive the price, maintain the price. Right now, you can't drive the price down, but the goal is to, get there.
I'll weigh in for a second.
Yeah, please.
I need a microphone.
Yeah, please do.
Yes.
My name is Rob Presley. Former resident of Belmont. I have a business in Belmont. I'm a real estate developer and also formerly sat on the planning zoning board. I've been involved in a number of projects, the creation of Eagle Park, Aberfoyle, and have a number of projects in the works right now. While my primary area of focus is commercial, it also includes residential and land development. And our brokerage company represents a lot of developers who are active in and out of Belmont. But there's a couple of things I wanted to mention. To your point, you can't guarantee that if you take a lot that has 1 house on it and tear it down and build 2, that they won't be the exact same price as 1 would have been. You can probably bet through marketability that they're going to be cheaper than the 1 house would be, because you can spread the land value over 2 units or 3 units instead of 1. And then the square footage of the units you build is not going to be as big as the single family. So would they fall under Cynthia's affordable category? There's no guarantee. There's a couple of points too that somehow we need to remember as well. When I was on planning zone board, we had a lot of discussion about this, but a house and I think the current number is somewhere around $275,000. A house $275,000 or less does not pay enough taxes to support itself. That means it has to be subsidized by commercial or larger homes. It just doesn't generate enough tax revenue to pay for police, fire, trash pickup, and all the other things that go into the city's budget. So, however, we can end up with a community that all live on half-acre lots with ranches. And unfortunately, over the last 5-8 years, some decisions have been made along the way in Belmont that are continue to push us in that direction and send this message that we want everybody here to live on a half-acre in a ranch, a brick ranch. Those days are gone, and that's not what people desire anymore anyway. And that's why you see product being built even out South Point Road that's on smaller lots, denser lots. People want to be part of a community. Councilwoman Stowe indicated it bothers me that Belmont was one of the leaders in the United States of traditional neighborhood development. It was something. Tom Graham, my partner, who, when we were developing Eagle Park, it's what brought him here from Charleston to do Eagle Park, which I don't think anybody would argue is not an incredible development. And it was built and designed in T&D fashion, and it was built to include duplexes on corner lots. If you go to Dilworth and Plaza Midwood and some of Charlotte's greatest neighborhoods, corner lots were set aside for duplexes. Fourplexes were often mixed into blocks. And the reason those developers did that back in the day is they realized not everybody that lives in a neighborhood or on a street can afford to live in a really big house. We have to have firemen and policemen and restaurant workers and school teachers and all these other people. And don't they deserve to live in our community too? Don't they deserve to walk to a brewery or a coffee house or a park in downtown just like we do? But if everybody in downtown lives in a $750,000 home, which is where we're headed, then it's a shame. They're all going to get pushed out. Yeah. And they're going to get pushed out South Point Road. And the city's cost to service a new 200-acre or 200-home community on South Point Road is much higher than it is to service a new resident that is put on a lot that was in town that already had infrastructure in place. So the best place for Belmont to see and encourage development is in town where we already have infrastructure, fire and police service. We don't have to build any new fire stations. We don't have to build any new police stations, and the trash truck's already there that day. So these guys that are building these infill lots, you should be making the process simple for them as long as there's checks and balances, because what you don't want is you don't want to disrupt the architectural or aesthetic flow of a street because they slammed a couple of cheap houses in on a street. That just disrupt, like a little Todd or Cedar Street could be destroyed by putting two cheaply built duplexes in the middle of the street. But there are three primary ways to accomplish affordability, and I'm not sure all this is about affordability. I think in talking to each of them, each one of them's got their own little agenda about what's hot on their mind at the moment. But to achieve affordability, you can build cheaply, you can subsidize it, or you can add density. So you can build cheap cracker boxes, throw them up with white pine real fast, and then in 20 years they look horrible.
Don't want to do that.
You can subsidize it, and you go get government money to have subsidized housing, and that is also a terribly expensive process, and it never turns out the way everybody envisioned it. It sounds good on paper.
You're right.
And the last is density. Not everybody needs to live in a for-sale single-family home. Even people that can afford to live in a for-sale single-family home might not. The empty nester may want to move into a townhome. Or the young couple, before they have children, may want to live in a condo. Or the single person who's working at Belmont Central may want to live in an apartment.
Yeah.
And all the apartments, we somehow have demonized apartments. And I don't know where that happened, but this town's screaming for 40, 50-unit infill apartment complexes. When we were going through Aberfoyle in that zoning process, that was a battle for a year. And you look at it now, and it's like, I bring developers from Charlotte and ride through there, and they're all like, this is absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. And there were good things that came out of it. The developer didn't get everything he wanted, and the city didn't get everything they wanted. But that's okay, because the end result was it fits well, it sits on a main artery that's easy to get people in and out of town. And so what bothers me most is we spent, 4 years doing a comprehensive land use plan. I mean, we had vignettes in public meetings. We sat in churches and basements and here and there, and we had all these input and everybody weighed in, and we created what I thought was a pretty amazing comprehensive plan. And ever since it's been adopted, we have done nothing but erode it and keep knocking away at it. And I don't know why that's happening, but it's causing a disruption in the marketplace. And it's not just felt at the little guy end, it's felt at the big guy end too. Charlotte, at about 10 years ago, Charlotte said, we've got to figure out a way to encourage development where we want it and discourage it where we don't. And Belmont has reached a place, in my opinion, we need to encourage and make it easy for good development to occur where we want it and discourage it where we don't. If we know South Point Road is too narrow and too tight and we don't want 600 more homes on South Point Road, make it painful or damn near impossible to build it on South Point Road until we can get arteries and thoroughfare and infrastructure to support it. In the meantime, we shouldn't stop progress. We should encourage. So in infill lots, we should get rid of some of these issues that are holding these guys back. These guys aren't building thousands of homes a year. I mean, this whole room probably builds 100 houses at most in a given year. Let's help them to do that. And when these developers come to town and want to build a boutique apartment building, you know, I looked at making a run at the Belmont Middle School, and I backed out. My partners and I backed out of that, at least we have to this point, because we weren't going to spend $3 or $4 million buying a property and spend a year arguing over what we could do with it. We know what needs to be done with it. I could hire the best planners in the United States to come in here and they'd all tell you the same thing. It should be a mix of use and a mix of housing types. It's one of the rare opportunities between the Stowe family land, where Mrs. Stowe's house is, and the Belmont Middle School. Those are the last two big tracts of land in downtown. And we have an opportunity to do something special, or we have an opportunity to do something also ran and just let it happen. We're at a pivotal crossroads, and I don't really have a beef with any of these, although I agree with about everything everybody in here said. But my hope is as a community, we'll go back and empower our planning zoning board to do whatever they need to do to get good plans in place and put a list of things that are holding people back, and for council to strongly consider these things. I think the question the city council has to ask itself first, and I wrote this down, does the city elected officials want a blend of housing in their community, both in terms of price point and architectural types of uses? And if the answer to that is no, we generally would just like to have single family homes on a half-acre lot and have brick veneer, then all this is for naught. Everybody you should go to another town to go develop and save yourself brain damage. But I don't think that's the case, because I know every single one of y'all, and I know what your thoughts are, and I know that you also do want to accommodate people and different types of housing. And so I hope that these things that they're saying will not fall on deaf ears, and we can begin to make some change. And I'll personally volunteer my time, and I know there's a lot of other people that will volunteer their time. Last thing I'll say is this, and Andrew said it best, I'm afraid as a community we've let the minority become the loudest voice, and the majority is remaining silent, and that's upsetting. I would tell you, when the sleeping giant wakes up in Eagle Park or Glenmere or some of these other neighborhoods and actually comes out and starts voting and starts letting their voices be heard, this will stop. It will stop. We're letting the tail wag the dog.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Thank you.
I've heard so many people say that they'd love to come to Belmont, but they can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Very expensive town. But if we can make these changes that you're looking at, we can make it easier for people to move here, they'll spend money downtown anyway. And we'll get tax revenue from it too. But I'm in agreement with you as far as people coming to Belmont. We had a guy come in today to get his taxes done. He said, man, I'm getting where I can't afford to stay here.
Yeah.
He's been here for a pretty good while, a couple of years, you know. His wife worked at the bank and stuff like that. But, you know, just try to make things more amenable for people to move here. I think it would be a better thing.
I think it's easy to, this is the type of house that I live in, and why would anyone want to live, this isn't, this is what I like. Why would anyone like something different than what I like? And I'm experiencing that firsthand as I discuss, moving into perhaps a new house with my girlfriend. She's like, "Oh, I want a big yard." I hope she's not watching, but
Everything is being recorded, Jim.
it's like, "Oh, I want a big yard. I want a big yard." And I'm like, "Who's going to maintain the big yard? It seems like it's going to be kind of expensive to have a big yard." I didn't grow up with a big yard, but she did. So she thinks a big yard is great. I grew up in a suburb of Detroit that would probably be considered a small yard. It was fine for and I'm like, I don't want to be mowing the lawn all the time and planting flowers.
It's very therapeutic.
Oh, is it?
For some people.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just the thing that I think each of us,
Yes.
this is what I like. Why would anyone want to live like that? But some people, based on their life circumstances and based on, what they can afford and what's going on in their life, that's what they like. And they're like, why would anyone want to live on a half-acre lot and have to take care of all that yard, and there's no one near you to like say hello to, or and I think no one really realizes. We all just assume that, this is what I like, so why would anyone want to live any way different than my choice?
And I think when we're in leadership positions, it's our responsibility to take care of everybody and not just people that are like us.
Because I do agree to the extent there's been discussions about, we should make lot size, that's, me personally, we're going to price everyone out of Belmont if we say, every new lot has to be like a minimum of X acres.
Right.
Like I've heard even like up to 2 or something, and I'm just like that. Like I couldn't afford to live here, and so I agree. Not everyone wants a huge yard that you have to mow and take care of, and So I recognize that, and I do think we need to all realize that what our personal choice of lifestyle might not be everyone's preferred choice of lifestyle. That I'd never live in a place like that. Some people would say that's my dream, and I'd never live like you live, Councilman Heffernan, or whatever. So, I do think sometimes we lose sight of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about infrastructure, and then maybe we can come to some conclusions about what we want to do going forward.
Yeah, so our last point is infrastructure, which we could probably talk another 2 hours about this. So there is a lot of valuable land in town that has either no access to public utilities while the citizens are paying taxes for them, or they have the utilities running across private property that makes that private property unusable without easements. So a lot of examples, I know people can talk about different places that they've worked in. The first one I have is the Reed community, and the little map here is of the Reed community. And there are at least 10 houses on that map with sewer and water lines running under private houses, under land. This is horrible for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, when these houses come down, when they burn down, the one, 310 Todd is one I own. Cassandra Lane's grandparents owned that house. They had no idea there was a sewer line under there. That house burnt down. They wanted to sell the lot. Every developer that came through, they would not buy it from them because there's a sewer line running through it. So now Cassandra is retired. She wants to sell her lot. Nobody will buy it from her. She's paying taxes on it, and she has to keep the grass mowed or she'll be code violated. And she can't sell it if she wants to because there's a sewer line that goes to the old Reed High School. The Reed High School hasn't even been there since the 60s, and nobody's really using that sewer line. And she ended up just basically having to give it to me for tax value because nobody else would buy it. And I gambled on it because I did buy it for tax value, and I hope to goodness we can do something about it. If we can't, it's just going to be a community garden over a sewer line that nobody's using. That's a problem with one, but when you come all the way up to that sewer line, there's 8 other houses that'll eventually have that same problem. And we're not talking about it, we're not prioritizing it. This is just the one I am most familiar with. I know Troy is very familiar with some issues down on Limestone. Rob in the Wilkinson corridor is familiar. I mean, we have places in town that are walkable to Main Street and they have no access to city water and sewer. And it'll cost us as developers $500,000 to bring water and sewer to these lots. And these people are paying the same taxes we are.
Yeah.
So
I'm spending $200,000 right now to build a road. I'm building a road of Johnson Street Extension, and it's placed on me, the developer, to build the road and put in the water and sewer, even though that is clearly platted that way. And then I have a parcel that's right now under contract in North Belmont that is in the corporate city limits of Belmont, and I was told by Bill Carroll, and then I checked with Parks. And they cannot sell that property to me. They have a large parcel that they need to get rid of because they need money for their church. And right now I've got to go do a variance request for septic system because the sewer is so far away that it's infeasible to run sewer. And I ran some sewer in my day. So, I think that's a problem if you have a piece of property that's in the corporate city limits, and then there's a process that I have to go through if the city is not providing the infrastructure, which it should be doing as a city.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to go pay for a fee and then jump through some hoops and hope I get a variance so a church can put some money in their coffers.
These sewer infrastructure issues, there are cases where Cynthia wants to build one house.
Cynthia wants to build one house in Reed Park and sewer's her problem, she may just have to hang tight. Because as a municipality, the money's not there, nor is the manpower or the resources to go jump every time a home builder has a problem with a sewer. But it seems to me, and we've talked about this for more than 10 years, there should be a master plan in place of the replacement or repair or improvement of urban water sewer failing infrastructure. It's not just that it's in the wrong place. In a lot of cases, it's just outright failing. And I know there's monies in the coffers, and there's been talk about putting a plan in place. As far as Wilkinson, and the reason Wilkinson showed up there, when Cynthia asked me to look at her notes, I'd called Adrian not long ago because there are a couple of pieces of property on Wilkinson corridor that I have interest or clients who have interest in potentially purchasing and developing. The families want to sell them. And Wilkinson, my gosh, we should encourage, I talked a minute ago about finding places to encourage development and discourage development. Wilkinson Boulevard's our front door of our city. Yep. And when I chaired the Wilkinson Boulevard corridor study 10 years ago, I did slideshow for y'all and said, we're working everywhere else but our front door. We need to get our foyer right. So fortunately, that's progressed along and the state's going to do improvements. We need to be thinking about our improvements too. But shockingly, I found out that Wilkinson through Belmont there's no sewer. So you couldn't develop the property if you wanted to. And you talk about subsidizing tax base for homes that are in the 275 or less, building a mixed-use project out on Wilkinson Boulevard that has direct access to 74 and 85. That's where you want that tax base. But with no sewer, it doesn't make financial sense for a developer to buy the property and then run sewer from all the way down in front of the credit union all the way up Wilkinson Boulevard towards Main Street. So there's little problems in the little neighborhoods that need to be addressed, but those are just going to have to be done on a long-range plan. But then there are major corridors where you want to encourage development, and those should be expedited. Now, I know Adrian mentioned that a lot of this, Wilkinson's timed out because of future light rail, which is coming in 2040 something, and also too road improvements by DOT. But I don't know enough to know, is there a strategic plan on the city's part to replace infrastructure every year to have projects that are moving through the works. And if there's not, I guess what I'm telling you is I'm trying to offer up some ideas of topics of discussion, how to resolve some of these issues going forward. Is this would be a good place to start, is infrastructure, water, sewer, the tree save, some of these encouraging development and infill lots as opposed to suburban greenfield lots. So it's the more you dig into it, the more you realize. I just hope City Council is aware, staff is, and again, somebody said at the beginning of this, staff gets the rules and follows them. They don't make the rules and then change them. So it's up to City Council, and that's why I'm glad you guys took the opportunity to come do this tonight.
The one thing I wanted to say about infrastructure is I understand that the way that it's prioritized right now is that the city engineer and the staff puts it in the capital improvements program, that it comes to City Council and it's agreed upon there. And the one place that's lacking is there's no input from the citizens about how it affects building or neighborhoods. So it's really just one idea I had is coming up with a citizens board that can speak on the effects of infrastructure issues. So that it's not just prioritized using black and white numbers and budgets and, the single engineer in the city that gives his opinion. It should also have a say on the effect of the people that live in the neighborhoods. And I just think that can lend a lot more to how they're prioritized.
I have a quick note. So Limestone Area, it's an area I'm very familiar with, but recently built a house on 7 Limestone, and sewer line runs through the backyard of pretty much every house down Limestone. Not a huge deal, but there's no easement. The city never recorded the easement for that. Seems easy enough. I know it takes some paperwork, but that should have been done so that there's a clear, defined rule over that. And so when I was developing, I was like, well, it's probably 20 feet, and staff agreed. It's, 20 feet sounds good, but there should be a schedule. If it's a drain pipe this size, it should be 25 feet. If it's a sewer line at 8 feet, it should be 20 feet, stuff like that. But also going as simple as, can I put a fence across it? Every other municipality I build in, if there's an easement, you can put a fence across it. If somebody has to come in and do work on that infrastructure, they take down your fence, they put your fence back. They tear up your driveway, they put your driveway back. Right now, that doesn't exist in Belmont. So City of Belmont, this is what I gathered from this conversation, City of Belmont comes in, takes down that fence, homeowner has to put that fence back up. There's nothing in writing that says, yeah, we've got infrastructure in your yard, we want you to use your yard. This goes to the tree ordinance. It sounds like the city doesn't want people to be able to use their yard how they see fit. And so there's nothing in writing saying a fence can go across an easement or a patio can go on an easement. You can't have a permanent structure like a storage building or a garage or a house or a deck, but something that's easily should be able to just go over that with no problems. Mm-hmm. And that's at least a start on infrastructure improvement, is at least getting a text amendment or something that says, hey, if there's a sewer line running through your yard or running through an infill, whatever, then here's what we go by.
Well, Adrian, what do you think?
I think you've heard some good feedback about how the rules that you make and the rules that we enforce and implement can sometimes they work exactly how they were intended, and sometimes they have unintended consequences. I think separating out greenfield development, particularly down on the South Point Peninsula, from infill development is really key. And I agree with you. Housing is not going to be affordable here for a while. We're not going to go back to that because you can't afford to build a $125,000 house. And no offense, but if we have too many of that, then it hurts our budget. So because we can't afford to serve it, then we have to have the other end to subsidize it. But what's really key with infill development, it's common sense, is that's where all of our amenities and our infrastructure and our street networks are. Right. So if we've got vacant lots in an area, in a neighborhood in the central part of town, we've already got streets that we're paying for that could serve it. We've got questionable water and sewer line serving it, but we're already servicing it with trash. We're already servicing it with police and fire, and you've got vacant lots, and that's a lot that could be a house or, you know, a townhome for somebody that could then walk downtown and really take a lot of pressure off of the peninsula. And you know, our peninsula has transportation and sewer issues down there, so well, that's a special concern down there. And if we're not going to be able to address those in the near term, that's going to put more development pressure in the core part of town, which frankly we need to be working to make it easier to build, you know, whatever it is, whether it's residential or commercial, closer into town.
Right.
I think there's some regulatory things that I would agree with Shelley that maybe you work with the planning board if there's things that you're open to just taking a second look at. Maybe the planning board can form some committees and work on those. There's some things we could do as staff, you know, identifying some of these infrastructure issues, and you know, and if you would empower us to work with property owners, whether it's relocating, you know, sewer lines that were built decades and decades and decades ago, that were built privately but in backyards, and you know, easy things back then, to get those out of yards and into streets. We could do that. We could work with developers and property owners on public-private partnerships so that the city's not fully subsidizing it, you know, for the benefit of somebody who's going to build a house and make a profit, because we want some people to make profits, but not everybody to make profits. So, you know, we don't want the appearance of the city subsidizing, you know, a developer. But at the same time, if you've got land that's been in a family's name, but they can't do anything with it, then we're really taking the value of their property. So I think there's lots of small ways that we as staff could work, you know, more proactively and more sort of in partnership with our local building community, so that we're not just at odds with them. But it's going to take.
I really appreciate everybody coming. I've got to go represent the city in Dallas, so I'm leaving now to go get there. So.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Martha.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you, Martha.
Hi, Martha.
But I think that, you know, as staff, we feel like if you would give us a little bit more leeway to work, you know, and if there are agreements that need to come back to the city, then obviously we'd take it back to you. But I think little wins would help.
Let me ask Shelley, based on what Martha said about the history of the zoning and what's there now, and how it's more based on greenfield than infill, in your professional opinion, do you think there's problems that with the way it's set up towards infill that should be addressed more to give more flexibility and leeway to infill development?
Yes.
Well, I like that. That's a non-lawyer answer.
So
It depends.
I've spent some time attending some webinars on ordinances and the difference in ordinances. Are they set up to support local builders who tend to build more in community character and better fit in the city than the large, I'll call them production builders that will come in and build? There's a big difference. You have to have, our ordinance is set up where you have to have very deep pockets to develop in our city. Yeah. And that is, we're going to ask for all this open space off the top. We're going to ask for all this tree save area off the top. Then we want certain roads, and we want this and that. And so it's basically written for the big companies with very deep pockets to come in and to develop. So there are things we can do to look at balancing that to get infill where we really want to see it, and give more flexibility to the smaller builder and developer to do the infill development where it makes sense. So there are some things we can do with the code. And I, you know, y'all can say what, you know, if you disagree. I mean, my personal opinion would be I'm sure the planning board will be thrilled about establishing another committee.
But
you know, I would be interested in having, an examination of this, whether you call it middle housing or whatever,
Really.
as to what kind of tweaks we could make to the land development code to increase the, lessen the red tape. I mean, I certainly, my personal political philosophy is we need less government red tape and restrictions. And I also think, we see government being, I think, at least as the higher up you go, the more out of touch they can be sometimes with the people they're supposed to represent. And, and we've seen a lot in the last 2 years, legislators and government officials just refusing to admit they're incorrect, or the way they might have done things might have been well intended, but doesn't make sense anymore. So I'm always open to tweaking things that, we thought this was a good idea, maybe it's not worked out exactly as we intended, or maybe it has certain, I want to learn and adapt. So I would be more open to more, see what you all find and what recommendations you make, and included within that exercise would be, diversity of, more diversity in terms of housing options, and then see what you all come back with for potential amendments. I would also be interested, again, we've already tweaked the tree protection ordinance. I want to make sure we get it right. I think it's a noble goal, but if it's being unnecessarily restrictive, I want to consider that too. That might have to go through the Environmental Sustainability Board like the last one did.
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to make sure that we get it right.
Can I make a quick comment to that? I think self-admittedly, Shelley said there's issues and problems with the tree save. There are 2 projects right now that are time sensitive to the tree save that may not have time to form a committee and take 4 or 5 months. Can we stay that for now? Because it does give Shelley the discretion to enforce it as she sees fit.
Well, certainly. I mean, my understanding is the way things are right now, and Shelley can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, looking at them, having reviewed the minutes in the Environmental Sustainability Board, like amendments, there have been other situations where similar requests have been made to Shelley, and she has gone to the Environmental Sustainability Board and said, this is why I think we need to make an exception or whatever, and then they've considered and made that.
They're empowered to make exceptions.
Yeah. So I don't think by saying we're forming a committee, that means we're going to hold, I think if you need to make your request for her discretion or her, I don't see why forming a committee to do that would belay that or prevent you from doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Me and Will would like to be exempted.
So I don't have the authority to exempt, but we do take issues to the board. There's some things that I have a little flexibility going directly to the board, but exempting someone from an ordinance is not within that privy. So we have gone to the board, and it may take a month or a couple of months, say 2 months, by the time I go to ESB board, then I take it to the planning board and city council.
Yeah.
So an exemption to remove something out of the ordinance would take about at least 2 months to do, which that does not have to wait for a subcommittee, like you indicated, if the board wishes me to pursue.
It states 11.1.5, no exemption or relief from regulations set forth in this chapter shall be allowable without the approval from the planning director or unless otherwise noted within this chapter.
Again, it allows me flexibility in some aspects, but it doesn't exempt.
Except for in writing.
Well, let me just say.
Well, we can take that off. But I think the broader point is that whatever you need to do, forming a committee would not prevent you from doing that in the meantime.
It certainly does, because I'm being told that I have to record 20% and dedicate it to tree save on a plat that I would like to do in the next week.
Let me just say that
it's in review. It's in review now. Same as Will. He's ready to fire up.
We just waited to submit. We'll submit tomorrow.
I'm being held up now over this business.
Well, let me say how much I enjoy this conversation that we had with you. We learned a lot. I think we learned an awful lot. And I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate what you do for the city. Thank you.
I mean, we can't rule on that. I can't, I don't know what you're asking us to.
I'm asking you to stay a problematic document that the city has adopted.
But I don't even think we can do that now if we wanted to without notice and proper.
We got to have notice.
Well, we'd have to give notice, and, I think we can't just make that decision.
So my question would be, so if we were to get something through within 60 days, that's not feasible or working within your
Say it's
timeline?
about $10,000 out of my pocket.
Mhm.
And as Jerry once told me, development's expensive.
He's right.
All right.
But I mean, we're constrained by what the rules are and due process and proper notice and rulemaking. So, I mean, I don't know.
Well, thank you all for your service and your time. For me personally.
Way to do it.
Yeah. I like where you were headed. Thank you for that, because this all would be for naught if there wasn't something we could all walk out of here on. What I'm hearing you say is maybe I'm calling put words in your mouth, but what I think I'm hearing you say is for the planning zone, put a committee or a group of people together and begin to identify and write red tape, it's called information, development, and bring it back to city council. So the city council has got to figure out a way, either eliminate it, fix it, amend it, whatever. I think that's the next step. Identify the issues.
What can we do about the infrastructure? I mean, is there?
I think that's.
What do you think the best way to handle that would be?
So I think that there's probably some specific, unique circumstances, that we've talked about, that we could work that out. I think that I like the idea of sort of the master plan. We have the master plan for the peninsula, but the master plan of where we need to either put in infrastructure like on the Wilson corridor, or to come up with a plan to replace older. And we're working on that with the grants that we're Kevin's project of identifying our lines and condition of them so that we have better data so that we can then formulate a plan of what we need to replace and be a little bit more strategic about it. So there's several things we can do on that end. I would ask that if the planning board is interested in taking on some of these issues, that we have a balanced group with the planning board to meet so that it's, I don't know how to best say this. You don't want a group of people that already have their mind made up about something to go and have an objective discussion about something. So you want to have a balance. So I'd like to have some of the planning board members, some staff, and then some your development community, so that you get a stakeholders group, like what we've done with the tree ordinance. I mean, obviously that didn't work out perfectly, but you had a group of people with different backgrounds and different experiences that can contribute, and then you can have a more meaningful discussion, and then we could bring that back to the planning board and then ultimately to the city council. So there's lots of things that we can do, so that we clearly want to keep our local building community building in Belmont, because if they're not, you're just going to get the national builders and everything's going to look the same, and we clearly don't want that.
And I mean, as I've learned, government sometimes doesn't work as fast as we like. We're not a business. We're subject to certain limits in terms of noticing things and how we go about things procedurally. So I apologize if you wanted, it
gives her the power to stop in written approval. It gives her the power.
We can review the ordinance and take the appropriate steps.
On the zoning, I mentioned earlier, we spent years working on a comprehensive land use plan. In downtown, the areas that we're generally talking about was identified separate and apart from the peninsula and other areas of town. And within that downtown urban core, it was decided that certain uses that would never be permitted somewhere else would be allowed in downtown. And what's happened ever since the day it got adopted, slowly things keep getting taken off the table. And that's the heartburn for me, whether it be an infill builder trying to build a duplex or a multifamily builder trying to build 76, condos or apartment units. It would seem to me that if we go back to the comprehensive land use plan and put a short list together of all the things that have been taken out of it since it was put into place, that's not fair to the community for 6 people to decide, well, that wasn't a good idea, we're just going to take that.
Shelley, have there been any things taken out of the comprehensive land use plan?
No, in fact, we did the update. Nothing's been taken out of the comprehensive land use plan. I think it's more relating the code to the comprehensive land use plan. And when projects come up that are consistent with the plan, they may not be consistent with some vision.
They're not honored. And
I'm sorry.
some of them aren't honored. Like when we're not honoring the vision when we ask for special use permits.
So there's the plan and there's the code. The
That's
code
correct.
doesn't necessarily jive with the plan.
Correct. Now, that's been eroded away. I think Martha spoke to that a little bit over time. But we do, any new plan that comes up, we do share with the council on any project, whether it's consistent with the comprehensive land use plan or the small area plan. And then ultimately, it's still their decision.
Are we in the process, or maybe we just discussed this, about doing a refresh of the comprehensive
We
land
talked
use
about that
plan?
at the retreat. We also talked about redoing the whole thing and revisiting.
Oh, I don't know about redoing the whole thing. But
Revisiting it and having those community discussions again.
So it's been about 5 years since you adopted the comprehensive land use plan.
You're right.
And so it is time to take a look at it, and we'll figure out the scope, whether it's a complete redo with the year-long public engagement process, or if it's looking at some of the chapters and updating those. But certainly, Belmont is different than it was 5 years ago, and so
We're open-minded now.
yes. Well, I would suggest that we have a public process to get input, and it could be that our vision is different than it was. That we want to keep Belmont like this, and we don't want it to grow. And if that's our community vision, then that's going to be reflected in your adopted plans. It may be that we haven't changed that much. It may be that it's just allow people on Facebook.
Proud of ULI, which is the Urban Land Institute, which is somewhat the think tank of the development world around the globe. ULI is a very important organization. It looks at trends, it looks at quality developments, and it's a think tank of the brightest developers around the world. There was a ULI luncheon here about a year ago, and the presenter was from maybe even the West Coast. And he was presenting slides, and one of the things he talked about was the millennials don't want to live in the same places that their boomer or Gen X parents lived in, particularly the boomers. They didn't want to live in dead-end cul-de-sacs on lots that were surrounded by fences. They wanted to live on streets and in towns and in urban centers where there was life and community and activity. And they said that instead of living in the suburbs, these new generation of people wanted to live in hipster instead of suburban hipster. And he cited some examples around the country, and Belmont was one. And the reason he cited it was the ability to live in and around an urban core and have community and places to eat and shop and do and walk. And we need to recognize that that's one of the things that people are attracted to about our community. And if we keep trying to undo that and turn it into a suburban development, I'm afraid we're going backwards to what the next generation of young people want. And Councilman Heffern's exactly right. What I want is a 54-year-old with 5 kids is totally different than what somebody wants who's 28 and looking at the prospect of a new job and a wife or a husband someday. We should try to accommodate all of those. And we're there, but it seems like we're just all of a sudden we're kind of trying to roadblock some of that. That's concerning.
Before are you all fine with
Yeah, no,
having?
I agree with you. I was going to say that if you didn't. No, I think there is, there isn't a one bucket or one shoe fits all approach, which we're currently going down. And I thought when we heard that special use permit the other night in regards to the trees and how they were all individually pointed out, I kind of initially thought, well, why are we doing that? Because of that approach. So no, I agree with you, Jim. Yeah.
I mean, are you?
Yeah, in general, I mean, I don't really like the special use permit process either. I'm not sure that anyone does. I think though, in some instances, red tape does serve a purpose, so I would want to be kind of cautious in how we approach that. But I mean, like Jim, my political instincts here to, if we don't need to be involved, I don't want to be involved. And then I guess the issue with the tree ordinance, I'd be interested in looking at that. And I know in the past we've talked with the lot widths, I guess going back to the special use permits, we have discussed potentially looking at a different way of calculating the average. I know there's a couple different ways to do that as far as eliminating outliers or looking at like a median value or something like that. But I'd be open to suggestions on that too, because I mean, I think it is kind of silly if you've got, lots that are 25 feet and then 200 feet in the same average. That average is basically meaningless. So I think that it's not really doing what it's intended to do there. So yeah.
I have a question. So what are next steps here? Will the council direct planning board to study this missing middle that we've been talking about for the last 2 hours, or is it just a recommendation? I'll just be honest, I was at the planning and zoning meeting, and Shelley made a great presentation on duets, kind of an introduction to what we're talking about right here, and asked if there could form a subcommittee, and no one was interested.
Yeah.
If no one's interested, then this whole conversation was interesting to all of us, but to no one.
But we did
Nothing's
get,
going to come of it.
what came out of that meeting, they did direct staff, or would allow staff to do work with our planning board members to bring back a draft about duet. They just never seemed to have the time to serve on subcommittee.
I mean, my intention in what I stated was that would be what Shelley and Adrian would go do according to what we've. So I mean, I guess it would be a directive.
So I think process-wise, yes, you council tell me to look into this, and then I'll work with Shelley and we figure out the best way. And if the planning board's willing to help us, that would be wonderful. And if they're not, then we'll figure out what to do.
Yeah. Okay. I think a need has been identified though, so I think that's.
So thank you all for your time. And Cynthia, thank you for putting all this together and organizing it.
For your time. Appreciate your time too.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, council.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.